Last night, two of Oregon's Democratic congresswomen walked out during President Donald Trump's address to Congress. Representatives Andrea Salinas and Maxine Dexter saying they did it in protest of the president. Representative Dexter wrote in a statement, "I refuse to normalize Trump's constitutional crisis. I will loudly fight back. I will relentlessly disrupt. I will unapologetically resist. Tonight, I left the State of the Union because I will not dignify his cruelty, and I want him to know that." And Representative Salinas wrote, "President Trump spewed more lies and continued to ignore the reality that his policies are hurting working families, not helping them. In protest, I decided to leave the House chamber early rather than listen to more false promises from a wannabe dictator. I will not be complicit as the president makes life harder for Oregonians." Oregon's lone Republican member of Congress, Representative Cliff Bentz, posted on social media outlining what President Trump talked about, saying the speech, quote, "reaffirmed the importance of securing our nation's future through strong leadership and action." And how about this one from Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley last night? "Trump and Musk's authoritarian administrative takeover knows no limits. They started by tearing apart the agency in charge of countering our adversaries' influence and strengthening democracy abroad. And now they are gutting staff at the agency that oversees your Social Security checks. This was never about, quote, efficiency." And let's pause on that for a moment tonight regarding the senator's comments on the influence of adversaries and the state of democracy abroad. Senator Jeff Merkley is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which yesterday morning held a nomination hearing for 3 of President Trump's top State Department nominees. The hearing marked one of the first times that Democratic senators could publicly face Trump nominees and pepper them with questions about the state of affairs between the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia, especially considering that explosive Oval Office meeting last week with Ukraine's president. Senate committee hearings like this rarely see the light of day for the general public, but Senator Merkley did not pull any punches, bringing a question that he says he's heard from constituents here at home. We think the tense back and forth with some classic pivots along the way is worth your time.
I wanted to ask you, Mr. Lando, is President Trump a Russian asset?
Absolutely not, Senator. He's the President of the United States, duly elected by the American people.
Well, the reason I ask is many people back home have been asking me this question. And they say, if he was an asset, we would see exactly what he's doing now. For example, he proceeded to forward or express from the Oval Office propaganda that has been Russian propaganda, that Ukraine started the war, that Zelensky is a dictator. Second of all, he gave away key things on the negotiating table before the negotiations even started, ensuring U.S. would absolutely oppose any possibility of NATO membership for Ukraine. Third, he's cut off the arms shipments to Ukraine, completely undermining their ability against a massive neighbor next door with short supply lines and huge resources. Fourth, he's undermined the partnership with Europe, which has been essential to security over the last 80 years, a major goal of Putin's. And then he's done everything to discredit and dismean Zelensky on the international stage with the just shameful press conference in which he teamed up with the vice president to attack Zelensky. I can't imagine that if he was a Russian asset, he could do anything more favorable than these 5 points. What else could a Russian asset actually possibly do that Trump hasn't yet done?
Senator, the president has made it absolutely clear that his top top priority is to try to bring peace and end an absolutely savage war. I know you're familiar with the savagery. This is turning into World War I style trench warfare now in eastern Ukraine. The president is an exceptionally gifted deal maker. He is probably the only individual in the entire universe that could actually stop this. The president understands, as part of his deal
Well,
making,
let's turn to another of
that
the
you
folks
have to
here.
have carrots and
Thank you
sticks.
very much, since you're now off the topic I was raising. Mr. Whitaker, these 5 things that the president has done that are so favorable to Putin and so damaging to Ukraine and to our partnership with Europe, do you approve of them?
Well, Senator, thanks for that question. I'm just going to have to politely disagree with you on those 5 things and the way you've framed them. You know, the war in Ukraine would have never happened if President Trump was president in 2022. The war in Ukraine happened because of Joe Biden's weakness after his
I don't think
withdrawal
that was
from
the question I
Afghanistan.
asked, but maybe you could some other time go on television and express those points of view. But do you mind just answering the question I asked? Do you agree with the 5 things that President Trump has done, starting with him expressing Russian propaganda from the Oval Office?
Well, you know, again, as I mentioned to your colleague, I am not here to assign labels. We're in the middle of a very important peace negotiation.
Okay,
I agree
thank
with Ambassador.
you. I do hope that we have an administration that works to get the very best deal for Ukraine, but what a Russian asset would do would be to work to get the very best deal for Russia, and that appears to be exactly what Donald Trump is trying to accomplish.
Now, I know we don't touch on national politics all that often, but it's tough to ignore at this point. So what do you think about the senator's questions and the answers he was given? Let us know. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail 503-226-5090 or hit us up on social media.